Hello, my name is Michael Dwan Herrick. I'm a psychotherapist and a life coach in private practice in London. Thanks for joining me for this 27th video in my series titled Questioning Woke Psychotherapy. In this video, I want to talk about resentment, what it is, how it can be corrosive to mental health, how woke ideology provokes it and maintains it, and what we can do about it. We all experience resentment at some point in our lives. It's not just a problem with the woke, although the woke seem to have a special talent for making resentment seem like a virtue. I think this topic is particularly relevant for psychotherapy, given the impact of chronic resentment on our emotional well-being and our relationships. It seems to me that therapists ought to help their clients deal with and overcome their resentments rather than seek endless justifications for them. If you want to work through your own resentments, or you're a therapist wanting to help your clients do the same, stick with me until the end of the video. I'll offer a way to do this. So let's start with a basic definition. What is resentment? Having read many different definitions, this is the one that popped out and seemed clearest and most to the point to me. Quote, bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly, unquote. Although a simple definition is a good start, resentment is complex. It can be a mixture of different emotions like anger, frustration, disappointment, and hurt, as well as predictable patterns of thinking. But let's make it more personal. I invite you to take a moment to think about someone or something that you have felt resentment toward. The more recent, the better. Was it a friend, a lover, a partner, a family member, a co-worker, or a boss or a stranger? What did they do or not do that made you feel unfairly treated? Were you imposed upon or excluded? For instance, forced to provide something you didn't want to give, or not invited to a party, or given your fair share of something? Was your reputation damaged by false accusations or rumors? Were you insulted or offended by some negative aspersion about your character? Did someone break a promise with you? Did you feel used, discarded, and abandoned by someone you invested in emotionally? See if you can think of an example and bring your attention to the feelings the memory evokes. Linger with that feeling. Where does it show up in your body? What does it feel like? What thoughts accompany those feelings? That's resentment. It's always useful to ground any intellectual understanding in our direct personal experience. This gives some flesh, so to speak, to the meaning of a word like resentment and helps us to be honest. Holding on to resentment isn't just something to accuse others of doing. We've all done it. So what are the consequences of persistent resentment? I think we all know, at least intuitively, that it's not good. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I generally can say that holding on to and nursing resentment and anger is stressful. It affects us psychologically, physically, and interpersonally. If it persists at a significant level, it can lead to depression, anxiety, general emotional dysregulation, and a mindset constantly on the lookout for negativity and offense, which tends to reinforce the experience of resentment. Physically, persistent anger and resentment can have a negative impact on cardiovascular health, digestion, sleep, and the immune system. Interpersonally, it breeds hostility, making it difficult to connect and collaborate with others. There's a loss of trust, and there can be an unbridgeable gulf between people. When resentment is harbored privately, which it often is, there's no communication that might resolve it. Again, can you make this personal? Have you directly experienced any of this? So, why would any of us stay stuck in resentment if we know it isn't good for us? I recently came across the phrase resentment intoxication, which immediately made sense to me. It's a concoction of powerful emotions that can take over our mind and behavior much like a drug. There's even a kind of high that can come from it. We might feel more powerful when dwelling in our anger. We might feel morally justified and superior. We might derive pleasure from fantasies of retaliation or actual retaliation. We might get attention, validation, and support from others who we tell our resentments to. When the costs of our resentment are not fully recognized, but the benefits are experienced directly, we're likely to continue indulging in it, just like any alcoholic. Okay, having set the stage, let's get into woke now. Among all the other things that woke is, I think, it's a vast and intricate system for directing attention, shaping perceptions and interpretations, and evoking emotions, all aimed in the direction of resentment. It's a grievance culture. It's ever vigilant for microaggressions. It asks not whether racism occurred, but how did it occur? In all of these ways, I think it could be considered anti-therapeutic. But before I go one more step, there's something that absolutely must be said. We have reasons to feel resentful. The woke are specifically concerned with injustice and mistreatment. What about that? It won't simply do to just point out the costs of resentment. It suggests that people get over it. That could accurately be characterized as the posturing of a narcissistic oppressor engaged in crude gaslighting, and I'm not going to do that. Along with all of the imagined or exaggerated grievances that we'll come up with, there are legitimate ones as well. Righteous anger can be a force for good, and not something to be meditated away or simply dismissed as political correctness. So how might we deal with our resentments in a better way than just ignoring or suppressing them? How might therapists work with clients who have resentments due to various forms of injustice or mistreatment that they encounter in their lives? How can we move forward in the face of these things without succumbing to resentment intoxication or wearing rose-colored glasses? The first step is to notice the experience of resentment and get curious about it. In other words, don't ignore it or get drunk on it. You might use journaling to explore this, but you could just ask yourself and contemplate the following questions. What specifically and exactly happened? What did someone do or not do that provoked my anger and resentment? Am I sure I'm not imagining something or falsely interpreting the facts? Is there a plausible alternative explanation for the other person's behavior? Was any harm actually caused or done intentionally? This can matter. What was the actual consequence of whatever I am resenting? How did it impact me physically, emotionally, socially? How significant was the consequence? And are my feelings commensurate with the magnitude of the consequences? Does my history of experiences with other people resemble what I am resenting about this particular person? Is it possible that old, unresolved emotions have been triggered and that everything I am feeling can't be blamed on the particular person I'm resenting now? Is it possible that the person who mistreated me spoke or acted out of their own pain, suffering, or confusion, and that taking it personally is not wise? Might this recognition even evoke feelings of empathy and compassion instead of resentment? What, if anything, do I want or need to do about it? For instance, do I want to confront someone and seek a resolution? Might this entail acknowledgement of what was done, an apology, and an agreement not to do it again? Might this instead be a firm setting of boundaries or even ending a relationship? Or might I let it go and do nothing at all? If I carry on feeling resentment and do not seek to resolve it, what is likely to be the cost to me and to the relationship? Am I prepared to bear that cost for the sake of whatever I'm getting out of the resentment? And by the way, what am I getting out of the resentment? And how much am I enjoying it? Can I choose to forgive this person? And would it be wise to do so? What conditions might need to be met for me to forgive? Do I know the difference between forgiving someone for the sake of the relationship and letting go of negative emotions for my own sake? Are there more important things for me to focus my attention and my life force energy on other than resentment? Can and will I let go of resentment about relatively insignificant events, or is it really so important that my life can't go forward without doing something useful with my anger? This is a real question, and I don't mean it rhetorically. I'll post these questions in the description below if you'd like to do some work on a resentment, or you have been struggling with, or perhaps you're working with a client. It could be helpful. Perhaps you can think of other questions that could be part of an inquiry into resentment, but I believe these are a good start. Again, while recognizing the resentment can be an intoxicating poison, at its root, it is very often connected to something quite real and important to address, like mistreatment or an injustice. Ignoring or suppressing the concoction of emotions that make it up and pretending that we are just above such things is likely to make things worse over time. Tolerating mistreatment amounts to teaching people to abuse us. Likewise, mindlessly indulging in resentment and acting it out leads nowhere good. It can lead to vengeance and retaliation, which perpetuates cycles of violence. Thankfully, these aren't our only options. There's a difference between resentment that leads to vengeance and finding one's power to take a stand. We can be assertive, set boundaries, and advocate for our needs without identifying as a victim. We can pick our battles and make a clean fight of it when it matters, and let go of petty complaints in order to get on with creating the life we want. In my last video, I talked about the film The Fall of Minneapolis by award-winning documentary journalist Liz Collins. The film is an account of the death of George Floyd and what happened next in terms of the rioting and the trial of Derek Chauvin and 3 other police officers. It's basically the tale of what happens when resentment spins out of control and boils over into intoxicated vengeance. Recognizing this opens up a whole other perspective on resentment. It's not just something that individuals feel toward other individuals. It can be a shared feeling by members of one social group toward members of another social group. This introduces a new level of complexity and a host of potential complications and problems. At the foundation of critical social justice theory, the intellectual engine for woke, is the categorization of human groups into oppressors and oppressed. One group wields power over the other group for its own advantage. The powerful group succeeds and the oppressed group suffers. This is the ubiquitous and defining nature of human relations according to social justice theory. So, which group do you belong to? If you don't have an elaborate list of grievances that justifies your resentments against another group, then you must be a member of an oppressing group. Instead of justifiable resentment, you're relegated to guilt and shame. Those are the acceptable emotions for you, and can only be somewhat, but not entirely, alleviated by confessing your sins and becoming an ally. Otherwise, you are likely to fall into the crosshairs of the resentment of an angry, vengeful, and intoxicated mob. It doesn't matter what you have actually done or not done in your life. Simply by virtue of belonging to a perceived oppressing group and not confessing, you are complicit in other people's suffering. You are, therefore, guilty and deserving of the punishments that must be meted out to all of your kind. And if you're a member of an oppressed group, it doesn't matter if the injustices you have personally experienced in your life add up to very much. There are always microaggressions to justify any degree of resentment. And if you won't admit this, then you are a race traitor and have internalized racism. It may be that sex and sexuality are not considered in a binary way anymore. Such a spectrum of possibilities is not afforded to the nature of human relations according to the gospel of woke. No, it's a closed system of perceptions and thinking that reduces people to the binary of oppressed and oppressor and guarantees resentment. But just as I paused earlier in the video to be clear about the fact that there can be real grievances at the root of resentment that should not just be dismissed, I want to be very clear about group resentments. There's a place for group solidarity in pursuit of justice. It's about finding power and voice and advocating for positive changes. Toward that end, I think the questions that I posed earlier can be a good guide for how this could be productive and not simply fan the flames of resentment and vengeance. Are the grievances real or imagined? Are they based on verifiable facts? Are there tangible things that can change an awareness of trade-offs inherent over time to any change? Is the group with a grievance willing to accept any responsibility for their own fate? Is the resentment insatiable, such that positive changes can't be recognized and appreciated? Is there true belief that we are in this all together and that all lives matter? Or does animosity toward those perceived to be an oppressor group know no limit? This video has been my suggestion that individually and collectively there is another way to handle our resentments. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. If you like this video, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications, and please leave me a comment. I read all comments and I try to respond to as many as I can. And if you think someone else would appreciate this video, please share it with them. I'm still a small channel, but I'm hoping to grow, and your help will be greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. That's all for now. Take care of yourself and each other, and I hope you'll join me for my next video. So long.